All right, Ronald, I think all of our discussions, not just our recent discussions, but all of the discussions we have had off the record, on the record, in the same dinners, in the same lunch, in our various Zoom talks, I think it should bring us to this question, which is what should the opposition do? Because for all the things that didn't work in favor of opposition, there's a good plot twist rin nangyari, no? Or relatively good plot twist. Yes, we have big concerns with lack of an anti-corruption initiative. We have big concerns with the Intel Fund, confidential fund, all of those things going to agencies which are not security oriented. I think we have no illusions about the kind of a social democratic progressive politics. Nevertheless, under Marcos Jr., my breathing space ng opposition, right? Things, parang some knots have loosened up, right? There's like around sigh of relief that not only has Marcos Jr. not turned out as another Marcos, as many people were fearing, although you and I were among those who did not panic right away, but also there's some positive signaling going on. And we know, both of us know, there are a lot of quote-unquote Dilawans who are working inside the government or working with the government in different capacities. So that shows there is an openness to some sort of a more grand coalition and some sort of quote-unquote unity. But having said that, obviously, as I said, hindi pwede na umasa na lang na mag-away yung Marcos Duterte para lang by default opposition comes back. That's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for disaster. Na, like hope is not a strategy, right? And the Marcos one, especially the one between Sara and Marcos, my analysis, it's mutually assured destruction. So both Sara and Marcos have an incentive in keeping it together. Ibang usapan yung tatay, ibang usapan yung mga DDS, but I think if Sara and Marcos, for now, both of them have an interest in not picking an open fight, right? If not more than that, perhaps there's really a rapport between them. So having said that, having this context of mixed bag, but at least there's a room for maneuver, there's a room for resuscitation. What do you think is, if we were going to come up with a kind of a manifesto or a kind of a 3-point, 2-point, 5-point, 10-point agenda, what are the top 3 things at least that comes to your mind, Ronald, in terms of yung advice mo for a blueprint? If you were I, pretentiously, self-anointedly, sit down right now and write a manifesto, wag naman yung Karl Marx type, baka maretag tayo, but any decent manifesto, what would be the first 3 big things that comes to your mind?
In the past few months, Richard, may mga iba't ibang mga groups, personalities na sinusubukang mag-convene ng small tent, big tent para going into the barangay elections at saka the midterm. No? Medyo hindi nagpo-flourish. No? Hindi nagpo-flourish. Dahil tingin ko, isang dahilan ay wala yung sinasabi mo. No? Wala yung manifesto. Di ba? Wala yung vision. Wala yung platform. Wala yung strategy. Ako, ang tingin ko, mas basic pa eh. Wala yung assessment. What went wrong these past 3 decades? What went wrong from the liberal democratic ethos? What went wrong from the progressive ethos? Hindi pa ako nakita hindi pa ako nakaranas o nakakita ng assessment, no? After more than 3 decades, no? Both from the liberal democratic groups at dun sa progressive movement, no? So
bakit Ronald, sorry, before you put, why do you think there's that? Because again, I'll be honest about it. I have had conversation with some people who took notice of my my critiques, no, and I think the election last year kind of vindicated a lot of things I was saying, and I'm not happy about it, right? I'm not happy with the opposition not doing well, but in a way, at least some people realize my point. Ito siguro si Haydar yan, di ba? Kasi, but one thing I realized is that this is what they told me, no? I said, well, first, tignan natin yung mga mas katulad natin. We're not Norway, we're not Sweden, wag tayo mangarap, right? I mean, of course, we can learn about certain things, but I think I said Latin America is very interesting. Yung whether it's Gustavo Pedro in Colombia, whether it's the situation in Boric in Chile, etc. So I try to find some sort of analog. And you know what? One thing I heard, Ronald, is this. No? Sabi nila, ang kaibahan sa Pilipinas is Asiano tayo. Pag sa mga Latino, and I talk to people who also are active in Latin America, they have a lot of Haydarians amongst them, and they don't take offense in having some aggressive character guy coming in. Like the Latinos like it, right? They like passionate guys, or kumbaga ma-appreciate yung mga interventions na katulad natin. While sinabi sa akin, Richard, hindi namin magawa yan sa mga kilusan namin kasi ma-offend yung iba, ma-hurt yung iba, ayaw natin mapahiya yung iba. So suddenly I realized, oh nga, no, baka I'm underestimating the cultural aspect na parang I overread into similarities between Philippines and Latin America, but I didn't realize the Latinos are actually much more aggressive and open and they can get away with it, no? Sasayaw sila and then okay na sila. Pero sa atin sa Pilipinas, pag parang pinaya mo ako, babalik ka. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, we're still Asianos, right? So while we're more liberal and open than, I don't know, Thai, Malaysians, whatever, for some reason, it looks like hindi rin pala gagana yung estilo sa Latin America na in your face, mali tayo, ayusin natin yan. Hindi daw pwede yan. You know this better than me because mas active ka sa kilusan. Ako, unfair naman to say I'm armchair. I have my own interactions, but you know more than me, Ronald. Is there a basis to this cultural argument? Na
Yes.
Post-mortem kasi mapaya yung iba?
Yes, bahagi yan do sa problema, Richard. No? Wala tayong tradisyon o kultura ng self-criticism. No? Meron yung ilang mga grupo, pero hindi siya naging mainstream. Very sensitive tayo, no, sa mga masasaktan ba yung iba, no? Masasaktan pa. Pero babalik pa ako sa mas basic, no? Very defensive tayo. Di ba? Ayaw natin na nakikriticize tayo no? Hindi ko naman sinasabi na dapat maging masochista, no? Pero that's supposed to be a part of it. To be self-critical, you have to tear large chunks of your flesh. Dahil bahagi ka ng movement. Bahagi ka nung naging crisis ng liberal democracy. Bahagi ka na naging crisis ng progressive movement. Whether you like it or not, whether it hurts so much, no? Kinakailangan mo i-confront yung ganong klaseng weaknesses. At masakit yan, Masakit yan, no? Ako, kahit kultura yan, some of us, no, especially the leadership, has to start confronting that, no? Has to start confronting that. Kung hindi, mangyayari yung pinag-uusapan natin kanina. This will just be moments. This will just be exceptions, no? The cycle of corruption will continue. Dahil nga, ayaw nating maging self-critical. Kaya sa akin, ang starting point ko, tinatanong mo, where do we start? We start with a summation. We start with an assessment. No? More than 30 years of liberal democratic institutions. No? More than 50 years of progressive movement. Anong nangyayari? Bakit lagi tayong bumabalik sa simula? Bakit natin inuulit yung mga mistakes? No? Bakit hindi nasusustain yung ating mga strong points, yung ating mga victories, di ba? Bakit no? Nananatili tayo sa margins? No? So, I want to start there. No? Halimbawa, sa aking sariling partido, no? 6 na taon na yung nakalipas, humihingi ako ng assessment nung aming, for the first time, participation sa gobyerno. Ako kasi first time ko napasok sa gobyerno nung panahon lang ni Pinoy. Di ba? And some of us, yun yung first time na nakapasok. I-assess namin yun. Wala pa kaming assessment. 6 years, 7 years na nakakalipas. So, halimbawa, from our part, isa yon sa dapat naming hugutan ng mga aral. No? Pero bahagi ng paghugot is a self-criticism. Ano yung mali na ginawa namin? Ano yung hindi namin ginawa when we entered government as a junior partner? No? Hindi naman, malinaw naman, hindi kami yung nagpapasya sa gobyerno. Pero meron kaming small part to play. Yung part na yan, ano yung aming lessons? No? So, that has to be broader. That has to be broader. Some of the progressive movement joined the Cory administration. Some of the progressive movement joined the ERAP administration. Some joined the Arroyo administration. Some even joined the Duterte administration. Ano yung mga lessons na nakuha dyan? Diba? It will be like tearing large chunks of our flesh, but it has to be done. Magdala na lang tayo ng betadine tsaka antibiotic pagtanggal ng mga large chunks of the flesh, but it has to be done. So yan yung una. Based on those lessons, based on that self-criticism, ano ngayon yung contours for the future? Diba? Based on that. Hindi pwede na gagawa tayo ng bagong vision, bagong platform, not based on the lessons, not based on the weaknesses and the failures. Mahalaga yun eh. So yun yung second part. Let us draft, sabi mo manifesto, let us draft the elements of a vision, a work in progress. But key elements, no? Ano ba ang gusto nating gawin para sa ating political system? Ano bang gusto nating gawin sa ating economic system? Ano yung component parts niyan? No? Anong components part? Lalong-lalo na yung usually ina-underestimate natin, education. No? Education. So, yan yung ikalawa. No? Pero mahirap gawin yan kung walang summation, kung walang real assessment. 30, 40, 50 years. Ang yaman yan eh. Ang daming lessons na makukuha. No? Kung gusto mo, gumawa ka pa nga ng project proposal para may research paper ka, tsaka may research resources ka para gawin dyan. Pero it has to be done. Katlo, then we identify yung mga leaders, local and national, na magdadala niyan. Magdadala ng ganyang klaseng vision, magdadala ng ganyang klaseng ethos, ng ganyang klaseng platform, ng ganyang klaseng energy. No? Sino yung mga yan? Sino yung mga yan? Tapos ano yung kinakailangan? Yun yung ikaapat. Ano yung wherewithal na kinakailangan in terms of messaging, in terms of training, no? In terms of skill set, no? Yan yung mahalaga dahil napakahalaga ng narrative eh. 'Di ba? Maganda nga yung ethos, pero hindi mo naman mapaabot dun sa 61% na bumoto kay Bongbong, 'di ba? So anong hindi yung condescending self-righteous tone na ginagawa minsan ng iba nating mga kasama, no? Bakit itong 61% hindi sa atin bumoto? Bakit itong 30 million hindi sa atin bumoto? Kailangan maunawaan natin, no? Para ma-craft natin a viable strategy to convince them, to reach them, no? Minsan very short term yung ating analysis. Kailangan natin mag-TikTok. Kinakailangan natin mag-social media. Kinakailangan natin na gawing kanyan, no? 30 second there, etc. That's okay. Pero that's only part of the strategy, 'di ba? Kailangan nating maunawaan why the G and E, why the poor and the poorest of the poor na dapat sana ay nasa atin, no? Na for our entire lifetime pinaglilingkuran natin sila. Pagdating ng botohan, hindi tayong iboboto. No? We have to understand yan. Hindi lang judgmental na, bobobo kasi nila eh. Well, napakahirap kasi nila, tatanggap sila ng boto, ng bayad pagdating ng eleksyon. So, beyond that, no? We have to understand. Diba? Yun yung strategy. Yun yung strategy.
Fighting, of course, yung vote buying and irregularities, and of course,
that's part of it. Pero bakit? No? Bakit? So, yan yung 3-4 components na tingin ko to start a real alternative, no? Sabi kasi nila, itong anti-corruption movement nila Magalong at 100 mayors is the semblance or the start of a third pole. Baka hindi pa. Dahil may mga key components na hindi pa ginagawa. Ito yung halimbawa, summation, assessment, no? Etc. So, tingin ko ito yung gusto kong daanan. In a tedious, painful manner, okay lang. But we have to go through this. Rather than ayaw natin ma-hurt yung feelings ng mga kasama, di ba? Ayaw natin na ma-depress yung mga tao, di ba? Ayaw natin na malungkot yung mga tao. Wala tayong choice eh. We have to undergo that process.
Medyo Carino brutal ng konti. Medyo tough
yes,
lang.
no?
Yeah,
yes.
I mean,
hindi naman masochism, pero
yeah.
Kinakailangan natin maging honest, no? That will be the start of a real movement.
So, independent.
Sayang eh.
Ronald, puro
sayang
tayong learning experience.
Di ba? Sabi ko nga doon sa isang interview, after EDSA, we experienced the golden days of coalition work. Bakit hindi tumagal? Bakit after 4 to 5 years, nag-unravel na ulit ang mga coalition? Ngayon, halos wala na. So, meron bang summation? Meron bang assessment? Wala. Wala pa ako nakikita. No? Kami, on our part, For the first time, pumasok kami sa gobyerno. 3 sa aming kasama, naging cabinet secretary. Anong assessment yan? 7 years na nakakalipas, wala pa. Diba? Yung kaibigan mo, si Walden, no? He was in Congress for how many? 6 years? 7 years? No? So anong summation ng mga progressives na pumasok sa Congress? No? Kahit nasa margins lang. Tingin ko, kanyan, hinog na hinog. Hinog na hinog yan sa mga lessons. Pero wala eh. Wala ko nakikita eh.
Wow, on that note, thank you. I think we really needed a conversation like this, no? Kasi ayoko naman sabihin na patama lang tayo and we're just trying to be armchair and try to play smart. But I think hopefully people realize with this kind of conversation, pinag-isipan natin na mabuti yan at hindi lang tayo banat ng banat, but we're actually looking at constructive ways forward because we know it can work. It has worked in other countries. Why shouldn't it work in the Philippines? It has worked in the past in the Philippines. Pero nga, we still are back to the problem of kulang sa follow-through, no? And I think in that sense, that's where Magalong perhaps is coming in, no? Dun sa follow-through because hindi na follow-through dun sa pink movement. There was no, I think, conscious effort by the campaign team of Lenny to organize this into a formidable force, not to threaten BBM and another EDSA, no? In a constructive, active citizenship sense. And I think that's where Magalong is coming in. But per our discussion earlier, hindi rin pwede si Magalong din only, diba? It has to really bring in other people. And I think we have to see more and more elements. Ang concern ko lang dito is because I think the other one superstars, whether LGU level or national level, they're also looking at their own plans. So they don't want to jump into something that they cannot control themselves or they feel na baka matain sila. So I don't know. I think everyone is playing safe, no? And there's still a vacuum of leadership. But as you said, and I've been always saying, there's also a vacuum of self-awareness and self-examination because I have yet to see a document whereby publicly, openly, there's a discussion about saan nagkakulang opposition. All I see is questioning election result. All I see is denialism and very toxic attacks on voters and all, and you're just digging in your own grave, right? And look at what they do also to you and I, people like you and I, or who have our own mind. And so far, I think we understand what's going on, and this is not about ourselves. This is about pointing out what's out there. But at least in this episode, we showed naman we have a kind of a blueprint in mind because this is not about who you vote for. This is about the future of our democracy, right? Thank you so much.
Halimbawa nga, Richard, last Friday,
please.
Nagsalita ako sa burol ng isang kaibigan, isang leader ng akbayan, si Josel, yung campaign manager ni Kakabagaw sa Dinagat, no? Pumanaw siya
successfully.
Pumanaw siya last week, no? Andun nga si Walden last Friday. So isa ko sa nagbigay ng parangal. Bahagi nung sinabi ko ay ang feeling ko, kami ni Josel, no, yung generation namin, parang ito na yung last generation ng mga organizers. Before kasi, to be a leader, kailangan dumaan ka muna sa organizing. No? Anong sektor yan, whether youth yan, whether urban poor, whether peasant, whether indigenous Filipinos, and whether labor. No? Yung aming generation, dyan na test dyan na measure no? At dyan na develop yung hindi lamang yung political skill set, kundi yung ethical foundations as well as ideological foundations, no? Parang ang nakita ko naputol na yung generation na yan. Yung sumunod, no, ay parang nawala na yung ganung klaseng ethos, yung ganung klaseng training, no? Naalala ko nung si Chito Gascon, no, yung head ng CHR, kasama ko yan sa Welga, nahulog sa anong tawag doon, yung ng mga baboy, no, yung pinagtatapunan ng kanilang mga waste, no, nahulog siya ron hanggang sa kuwan, no, tawa kami ng tawa, pero ibig sabihin yung generation namin nila Chito Gascon nasa frontline Si Arlene Santos, yung SecGen ng Akbayan, no? Nabuhusan niya ng kumukulong tubig nung welka ng Saulog tsaka Dagupan Transit. Mga kwenyan, mga college students, no? 4th year, 3rd year, no? Diyan sila, kami nila Tom Villarin. We were sent to Basilan. Hindi namin alam anong ginagawa namin doon. We were sent there to organize cooperatives in the middle of a war, no? Doon namin nakilala yung founder ng Abu Sayyaf, sila John Jelali, sila Abu Sabaya, no? 1989, 1990, 1991, no? We were in our 20s. No? Pero sumusunod kami sa hinihingi ng aming mga leaders o hinihingi ng pagkakataon, no? So we have to improvise, we have to train ourselves, no? Parang yung generation na yan ay nawawala na. Whether yung panahon natin ngayon ay panahon ng social media with new instruments, tingin ko kailangan pa rin yung basic organizing. Kailangan wag mawala. Dapat kasama yan dun, hindi lamang sa ating assessment, sa ating strategy. No? Kaya, nung pinag-uusapan natin ito, part of my mind, naaalala yan Yung ganyang klaseng cup, half full. No? Na isa yan sa strong points na medyo nawawala, nagdi-disappear.
Yeah. Huh? Sir, what's the reason? Because for me, one problem I see is all of this postmodern nonsense about horizontal, spontaneous. I mean, my first book was on the Arab uprisings, right? And that was the perfect embodiment of spontaneous, blah, blah. And what happened? Nothing. The only one that came closest to success was in Tunisia, but that was because of the Ennahda party, which had a strong basis, and the labor unions in Tunisia. Yeah. Strong. So the only semi-successful case in Tunisia clearly proved na hindi ka rin pwede umasa dun sa Tahrir Square moment and Twitter revolution and all of those nonsense Silicon Valley stuff back in the day, diba? So, Konim, for instance, the former Google executive, had this Revolution 2.0, all of those nonsense, right? And 2014, sinulat tong libro na to, and I said, this is not going to work because social media can even be better used by authoritarian powers. And guess what? Russia, China, and the reality we're facing today. So the 21st century has yet to produce a single fully successful revolution, unlike 20th century. So all the successful revolutions we have in the 20th century, all of them relied on leadership, organization, and a certain level of centralized leadership, right? There's no revolution that succeeded with the spontaneous postmodern nonsense we're hearing there. And no, because I hear this a lot from not only yung mga pa-woke na liberals, but yung mga iba sa left na we don't need leadership, we need blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard because it has no empirical evidence whatsoever to it, no? And I know you can guess sino yung mga pa-intellectual or intellectuals who are pushing this. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Sinimula mo na, Richard, yung pinopropose mo na summation saka self-criticism. Sinimula mo na, no? Several years ago, may nakausap ako na tao na presumably an intellectual. Ang sabi niya sa akin, there is no more history, there is no more ideology, there is no more morality. There is only beauty. No, there's only language. No?
Imelda Marcos yata yun. Kasi Imelda Marcos yan, it's only beauty.
Natawa ako. Pero galing sa kaliwa yan, no? Na naging postmodern. So sinisimula mo na yung self-criticism. Sinisimula mo na yung ganyang klaseng summation. Yung ganyang klaseng temptation, no? Yung nasobrahan sa postmodern eklat, no?
Eklat, exactly.
So, ako, hindi ko naman gusto ibalik yung nakaraan, no? Pero tingin ko yung nakaraan ay bahagi pa rin ng kinabukasan, no? Yun yung gusto kong balikan, no? Kailangan pa rin may magmamahal ng barricades, no? Habang may nag-aayos ng social media,
warm bodies.
Mga old fogies like me ay mas comfortable pa rin sa mga barricades. At ang isang ginagawa namin ngayon, Richard, ay mentorship. Dati kasi seminars, teach-in. Ako ngayon mentorship. I train 4, 5, 10 young leaders. I meet them once a week sa aking garden, no? And tell them the lessons. Hindi masyadong structured, no? Hindi Paul Ed. Hindi masyado, more experiences and draw from it conclusions. Purposeful conclusions. Inimbita ko rin si Father Edicio de la Torre to do that with some of our youth. So, yun ang sabi ko no? Edicio de la Torre just turned 80 last week, no? Ang sabi nga niya, bago naman siya pumunta in the great blue yonder, mapasa naman niya yung mga lessons na natutunan niya sa kanyang more than 60 years of work in organizing. Some of us have to do that. Hindi na namin hihintay maging 80. No? Ako at 60, baka may 10 productive years pa ako para mag-mentor ng new generation. No? Pero nauuna na ako, sinimula mo na kasi. yung pinag-uusapan natin kanina na summation and assessment. No? Hopefully, huwag masyadong maromanticize itong mga postmodern temptation.
Hopefully there's a nicer version of me who can do it. As I said, para my style may work better in Latin America or US. Because for me, if it's nonsense, I'm gonna call it out. All of this horizontal, it doesn't work because I studied carefully how it didn't work in the Middle East. It's not working anywhere else. And the few successful youth presidents or presidential we had, like if you look at Boric, for instance, in Chile, and some of their ministers, they literally came from the student activist movement of organization and party building and coalition building. Case of Pita, who should have been the prime minister, the closest success we have of young leader version in Southeast Asia so far. Again, this guy had organization. There was movement on the ground. Hindi sila nakinig din sa mga postmodern atomist, whatever. I mean, like, it's so nonsensical. I don't want to even remember some of these concepts. I know I wrote about this before. You can look at my academic works, but I was always skeptical about it because for me, it's just a lazy way of saying you can tweet the revolution. Guess what? You cannot tweet a revolution. You can tweet a revolt. You can tweet your rants, but you cannot tweet a revolution. And this is as much, Ronald, a criticism of myself because I think I give all of these talks, but yeah, you can also criticize me because wala, sa generation namin, kulang talaga yung mga tao na who have charisma, the right thinking, and at the same time, the organizational skills. And I'm absolutely happy that you mentioned that because I and Lelo, we had a separate discussion about this manifesto. It didn't come up the way you did. And it just tells that in our generation, I think we get the big picture right. We get some of the analysis right. But the organizational skill really is not there. No? And kitang-kita yung 15 million, yung millions na lumabas na pink movement, is there any organization keeping them mobilized and active and excited and engaged? I don't know. I don't think some civil society group can do that. One organization through. I know Magalang is trying to do something, but more has to be done about it. Thank you so much, Ronald. I think we really needed that kind of real talk. That was a real talk conversation about what the opposition should do. Being makulit, of course, we're gonna hammer this point over and over again, but I think it should be heard, and I'm sure hindi inaamin ng iba, pero marami nag-agree sa atin at yung mga marami na who need to listen are listening to us. It's okay, don't give us credit, but we know the idea. We know where things are coming from. Consistent naman tayo, di ba? Ever. Thank you so much, Ronald. God bless. And
anytime, no?
Anytime.
Marami pa tayo dapat pag-usapan.
Mabuhay ka. Puso.
Thank you.
Yes. Talk to you soon.